My name is John. I'm an alcoholic. Can you hear me back there okay? Good. Seeing this is Big Book Step Study, I have been through this process by the grace of God. 2 Big Book Step Study sponsors. I'm currently making my amends, and I practiced 9, 10, 11, and 12 today. And I was thinking, about a month and a half ago, Mike asked me if I wanted to speak at this anniversary, and I've never been asked to speak at an anniversary before, and I didn't know what to do. Because for me, it's like, even when I go to a Big Book Step Study meeting and I get to speak for 5 minutes, I want to be the most profound person in that room, so that after the meeting, you'll come up and kiss the ring. And so I was talking to a friend of mine from the Laconia Big Book Step Study meeting, and I forgot what it was, and so I said to him, I said, George, I was asked to speak at this anniversary meeting, and I says, I don't know what the hell to do. I said, what do I do? Well, he just recently, he got a chance to speak at NEFOTS up in Portland this last March, I think it was. And he said, well, what I did, he said, I just prayed. That's all he had to say to me. And then I have a wonderful sponsor who I respect highly. And so I was talking with him one day, and I told him I was asked to speak at this anniversary, and I said, what do I do? And he says, just emphasize Big Book Step Study. Because I do a lot of regular AA meetings, and I don't hear there what I hear here. They would rather talk about the problem and how great they are, and they're not working the steps, and they're whack nuts. And so I sit there and I think, geez, for 17 years I acted like they did in regular AA because I wasn't working the steps. And I kept drinking. And so today, on the way down, I'm from West Lebanon, New Hampshire, so it was about a 2.5-hour ride. All I did was pray. Because, see, being an alcoholic, and I'm one of those that they talk about in the big book. I'm a chronic alcoholic. I'm not just one of these, tipsy alcoholics. I went right to the bottom. And so on the way down, I just prayed. The second my mind started to wander, I prayed. And when I got here, I prayed. And I have no idea what I'm going to say, but I do know for a fact that I am a chronic alcoholic, and for me to stay in recovery and stay in AA, the only other thing I need is I have to have God in my life. So it's going to keep me here, And so I do, when I come to Big Book Step Study meetings, that's where I get replenished, Wednesday night at the Laconia Big Book Step Study meeting, I forgot what chapter we read, but it talked about alcoholics being undisciplined. And when I do more open AA meetings and I do Big Book Step Study, that's where I go. I start to get undisciplined, And usually I get into some kind of little bit of a consequence, or, some pain starts to develop. And so I've had to get back to Big Book Step Study. So that's what I do. And, and by going through this process, I found when I did my resentments, because I used to hear in AA when I was around before that, when you're a kid, you're not responsible for your actions. Whatever happened to you when you were a kid, it's not your fault. And I kind of like that. Being an alcoholic, because then it's not my fault. So when I did my writing, I got into my resentments, and I found out where my life started. My self-centered life started. I was 4 years old. My parents had a cottage on Perkins Pond, which was up near Lake Sunapee. And I remember my parents bought me a brand new pair of shoes, and we went to camp. And my father set me down on the ground, and the first thing he said to me, he said, don't go near the water with your new shoes on. And the second he let go of me, I'm standing up to my knees in the water with my new shoes on. And he's standing there yelling at me. And I remember by doing this process, I remember the second he started to yell at me, my ears closed. And that's when I was 4 years old. When I was 48 years old, I had just gotten kicked out of the state insane asylum in Waterbury, Vermont. I was dirty. I was filthy. My mouth was just the same. I'd just soon tell you what you could do with yourself is to look at you. You know, I hated life. I had tons of suicide attempts. And the more I failed at suicide, the more I got resentful at myself because my father was right when I was 4 years old. I'm no good. What the hell's the matter with you? You can't do anything right, you know? And so by doing this process, I'm finding out my past, which I didn't pay any attention to. I shut everything out. When I was at home with my parents, I used to I'd go in my bedroom and I'd close the door. I didn't want nothing to do with them. I was ashamed of them and me back when I was growing up. So I distanced myself from life. I didn't want to deal with the hollering. When my father stopped drinking when I was 4 or 5 years old, that's what happened to my household. It went into rage every day. Either me or my mother or both of us got the results of his rage. And so at 4 years old, I started to decide what I was going to do on myself. And I heard, you know, when I got old enough to go out in the job market, you know, people are you're supposed to run your own life, you know, take a hold, take control, you know. So I did that. And at 48 years old, I'm where I always go when I drink is I get locked up somewheres. And usually it's in an insane asylum, whether it be, you know, in a hospital or it be at a state hospital or in a treatment center. See, that's the thing that I've learned is they call them treatment centers. For, you know, because society wants to be sweet and kind to these people, you know? And then I finally realized they're nothing but an insane asylum. I went there, and I was insane, you know? So I don't look at them as treatment centers. They're, you know, I went to 2 of them, and they were people that talked to me that weren't even alcoholics. I had no idea what the hell they were talking about. John, you got to do this, you got to do that. Well, I heard that at home. You know? So I didn't do what they did, and I drank again. So I spent 17 years around AA, and I kept drinking. And I couldn't find a sponsor to take me through the steps. Nobody wanted to take me through. All I heard was, don't worry about the writing. Get yourself a girlfriend. Get yourself a high-paying job. And this is from people that have been around AA for a long time. You know? And get a couple of mobile homes and rent one out so you can have lots of money. And that's the stuff that I was hearing. And I kept drinking. And so on March 19th of 2001, 2 weeks prior to that, I had threatened a psychiatrist at the state hospital in Waterbury, Vermont. And you know, people don't like to get threatened. And I've learned that in Big Book Step Study. Yeah. You know, I learned that by going through the process. I threatened this lady. We were in boy, I'll tell you, I was nasty. And that's why even the people in these psych wards and state hospitals, just the people who were crazy didn't like me. Never mind people who had drug and alcohol problems, you know. And so this little German woman, she was a psychiatrist, and today when I look back, she tried to do, she tried her butt off to get me to come back to Alcoholics Anonymous. That's all she didn't know what to do with me. So I think you should go to AA. Of course, when I went out drinking in September 2000, AA was not on my to-do list, you know, ever again. I got sick of listening to, well, just don't drink and go to meetings. If your butt's falling off, pick it up and go to a meeting. Well, I did that, and I kept drinking. So when this lady was trying to get me to come back to AA, all it did was add to the resentment. It added to my rage. It added to my, you're not going to tell me what to do. And so she's sitting there, and she said, Mr. Caffrey, she says, if I was your mother, and of course, like me, I interrupt people when they're speaking, and I looked at her and I said, if you're my mother, I would shoot your ass. I got up and I walked out. And a couple minutes later, one of my old sponsors that I had came up to me and said, you know, John, he says, in 2 weeks you're being kicked out. He says, if you leave this facility and you kill somebody, you're never coming back here. And you know, for an alcoholic, or probably for a normal person, they would understand what that meant. And all I did was I went back to my room and I started to feel sorry for myself. Because when I'm out in the real world, I'm walking the streets of Burlington, Vermont at 3 o'clock in the morning, sleeping out in the bushes, not knowing what the hell to do with myself. So that's why I became suicidal. So when on March 19th of 2001, and I'd been through a marriage, I got 2 boys, I got 4 grandkids. I really got 5, but one died before it was born. So I'm hoping that when God sends me to heaven, I'll get to meet my 5th grandchild. And so anyways, on March 19th of 2001, well, that day that I was informed that I was being kicked out of the state hospital, I went back to my room, and I'll tell you, you know how alcoholics, we love to think. You know, well, I'm gonna fix this by myself. So I kept thinking of ways that I didn't have to come back to AA. You know, I've got rage. I'm homicidal, I'm suicidal, and I hate everything about myself and about the world. So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, well, I'll go to a psychiatrist once a week, and then I'll hook up with one of the mental health places in Barre, Vermont, and I'll go to them 2 or 3 times a week. I'll be fine. And then I kept thinking, well, geez, a psychiatrist. You just can't call them up at home when things are going bad and talk with him. That's what I heard in AA. And these little centers that they had there, you can only go once a week, talk to somebody, and then they don't want to talk to you either. And so finally, I just ran out of brilliant ideas. And I'm sitting on the bed. Next thing out of my mouth was, God, I need some help. And that's all I said. The 2 weeks went by. I had no burning bushes. I saw no burning bushes. I didn't see any white lights. So I knew God was done, because I'll tell you, when I went out this time, I was nasty. I mean, all you had to do was look at me, and people walked away. And so I knew God was done with me. He'd had it. He said, you screwed up this time, big time. So on March 19th of 2001, when they brought me to a little dingy motel between Barre and Montpelier, Vermont, and dropped me off, I was going to go to Danny's Pub in Barre, Vermont, and I was going to get drunk. And I'm thinking, boy, these idiots in AA think I'm angry. I'm going to show them what I can really be like. So I got in my room. The only thing I had in my possession was 2 little garbage bags. That's why I can identify with the other chronic alcoholics. I can't identify. I had a hard time when I got sober identifying with people who had boyfriends, girlfriends. They went back to their apartment, or they went back to their house. They had cars, they had motorcycles. I was lost. And so anyways, he dropped me off. And next thing I know, I'm on the phone and I'm talking to a guy in Montpelier, Vermont, who was in AA. Couldn't believe it. I have no idea what we talked about. He said to me, the only thing I remember him saying is, John, I will pick you up tomorrow night. And he says, we'll go to a meeting. So apparently God kept me sober, because when he picked me up, we went to a meeting. It was Tuesday night, and in Berlin, Vermont, at the hospital, there's a little discussion meeting. Don't remember what was said. I don't know who's there. Because the only thing I did when I sat during that meeting was look at my sneakers. There were 2 people that sat next to me. I have no idea who they were. I had so much shame and guilt that I didn't know what to do. But I kept going. Apparently, I kept going to meetings. I have no idea how many meetings I went to, but I was a week or 2 sober. And I'm sitting at the Sunday night Montpelier meeting. It's a double speaker meeting at Christ Church. And I don't know at what point during the meeting, all of a sudden I started looking around. I said, Jesus, I know that guy. He used to be my sponsor. I know that girl. I've seen her before. And then they had the banners, the blue and gold banners up around the room. I looked and I'm thinking, boy, I'll tell you, I had some nasty thoughts. I'm thinking, holy, I'm back in AA, and I couldn't believe it. And that was a week or 2. I was sick. My sponsor talks about being Mocus when he came in. I was beyond that. I was just so out of it. I mean, I was so out of touch with everything. But for some reason or other, God saw fit that I needed to be here. And so for the next 5 years, I went to tons of meetings. I could not find a sponsor to take me through the steps. When I would go to a meeting, the only thing I would hear at that meeting was C, when they read how it works. That God could and would if he were sought. I knew that was the answer because, in those 17 years I was around AA, people told me, hey, see that guy over there? He's got 35 years. Go get his phone number. So I'd get his phone number and I'd still drink. Well, see that lady over there? She's got 14 years. Go over and ask her for her phone number. So I'd get her phone number and I'd still drink. Nobody could explain to me how I was going to get out of my malady and how I was going to get out of myself and get into recovery. And at 5 years insane in AA, you don't have to be drinking to be insane. I found that out. 5 years insane in AA, not working the steps, the disease progresses, even in AA. So don't think just because you're sitting in an AA meeting, you're safe from ever drinking again. That's a lie. So at 5 years, I'm in White River Junction, Vermont, sitting with a counselor, again, which I thought was going to straighten me out. And he said, Jesus, John, he said, you're headed out for a drink. Yeah, but I'm doing 400 meetings a week. He said, I don't care. He said, you're headed in the wrong direction. And he introduced me to my first Big Book Step Study sponsor. That was in May of '06. I met this guy an hour before, I went to the anniversary there. This guy told me, he says, there's an anniversary meeting in Wilmot on Monday night. Go there and ask for this guy to be your sponsor. So I went there, he was there, I asked him to be my sponsor. He said, meet me an hour before the meeting next week. And that's all he said. And all week, if it was a gorgeous girl, I would have no problem with that. But a guy, all by ourselves, I don't think so. So I'm thinking, I wonder if he thinks I'm gay or something. All week. I really didn't want to meet with this guy. So that Monday, I was at the end of my ropes. I'm going to tons of meetings. I'm miserable. I'm dying on the inside. And people are telling me, oh, geez, John, you're doing good. Go to another meeting. And so I said, well, I'll give it a try. That's it. If this guy doesn't work out, I'm going to go drinking. So we met. The first thing out of his mouth, I didn't know who this guy was from Adam. He said to me, John, we're going to work the steps. 17 years in AA, I never had a sponsor that told me that. So I'm thinking, boy, there's something different about this guy. So he asked me A, B, and C. He said, do you believe you're an alcoholic and you can't manage your own life? Oh, geez, well, I just got kicked out of a state insane asylum. I think my life's unmanageable. Number two, do you believe that no human power is going to keep you sober? Well, Jesus, for 17 years, I put the guys and women with 20, 30, 40, 50 years on a pedestal. I'm not going to drink because I'm hanging with a guy with 35 years. All I had to do was go out and touch him, and I'm sober. And that's the stuff I hear in AA. So then they wonder why newcomers don't stay here to get sober. They're hearing BS. And so we got on our knees, we held hands. Now, if you've ever been to Wilmot, when you walk through the door, right into the hallway, there's two big windows that are like that high off the floor, and then the rest of the hall is dark. So this guy says, we're going to do the third step prayer, on our knees, holding hands. Where do we hold our hands and on our knees? Right in front of them two damn windows. And there's a house right next door. And I'm thinking, all the time we were saying the third step prayer, I'm thinking, what the hell are them people thinking of me? Boy, I didn't want to leave the meeting because I know these people would see me and they'd want to say something. But anyways, we did the third step prayer. When we got up off our knees, he looked at me and he said, John, he says, when you go through this process, he says, will you carry this message to another man? He didn't say woman, he said man. And I understood that. And in May of 06, I started my writing, and it was Wilmot. I thought Wilmot was the only Big Book Step Study meeting in the world. Then I found out there were more than just Wilmot. So Monday night, I lived in Claremont, New Hampshire at the time. Monday night, Wilmot was 45 minutes one way. Tuesday night, I didn't go anywhere. Wednesday night was Nashua. That's 2 hours one way. Thursday night was Concord. That's about an hour and 10 minutes one way. Friday night was Thetford, Vermont, which was 45 minutes. My first sponsor moved, so I got a new sponsor, and my sponsor lives in Seabrook. So Saturday mornings I had to go to Newington, which was 2 hours one way. And then Saturday night was Laconia, New Hampshire. So I would go to Newington, then I'd drive to Laconia, which was about an hour away, and then that was 2 hour ride home after the Laconia meeting, and then Sundays, the Keene meeting started up. So 7 meetings a week, I'm in Big Book Steps. I did no open AA meetings while I did my writing and my reading, none. I didn't want to hear people telling me, oh, John, you're doing great. Just go to another meeting. Oh, God, John, you look good. Because my alcoholic mind will say, oh, well, maybe I'm okay. And I didn't. So for 13 months, while I was doing my writing, I did those 7 Big Book Step Study meetings a week. I was unemployable. I had no friends. Of course, I didn't have a girlfriend because nobody wanted to come near me. And then the next 4 months, I read my 5th step to my sponsor. In those 4 months, I did 7 Big Book Step Study meetings a week. I maxed out 3 credit cards, paying for gas. Once in a while, I'd get a motel room, like if I went to Nashua, and I'd stay overnight. McDonald's, I supported McDonald's for quite a while, and Burger King. So I maxed out 3 credit cards, which was in the vicinity somewhere, 15, 20 grand, keeping my car on the road too. But that didn't bother me. Because I'll tell you, I grabbed onto this with everything. I was desperate. I was hopeless. And I grabbed onto Big Book Step Study like nothing else ever in my life. And I still do. All this time, I watched my sponsor. And he'd be asked to speak at a meeting. He told me one day he was asked to speak at a meeting somewheres up in the boonies of Maine, way out in the wilderness. And I said, I want to be like this guy. But the thing I want to be like this guy is, he never told me 90 meetings in 90 days. He never said, well, if your butt's falling off, pick it up and go to a meeting. None of that open AA stuff. All he did was he showed me how these steps out of the Big Book work. That's it. That's it. None of this, oh, well, I heard a guy at a meeting a little while back in my area. He was 7 years sober. And his sponsor still wanted him to call him twice a day. So I talked to a guy in Big Book Step Study, and he said, Jesus, John, he says, the only person you're talking to in Big Book Step Study is your sponsor. If he drinks, you going with him? And I brought me back to this guy at 7 years, twice a day, 7 years. He's still got to call his controlling sponsor. And I made a decision. That's a change I have to make. I talk to a lot of people now. So if my sponsor decides to go out drinking, he's on his own. I will get another sponsor. And that's what this process has done for me. This process says in the Big Book that I have to have a psychic change in order to stay here. And I'll tell you, I've been a little over 16 years sober, and in May of 06, I started this Big Book Step Study process. I'm not the person I was in May of 06 when I was 5 years insane in AA. I have changed. In the 10th step, it says, when these crop up, resentment, fear, selfishness, dishonesty, we ask God to remove them, and then we talk to somebody. That's what I do. God is the most important fact in my life today, and that's what I found doing it. I hear people in AA, they have to analyze this first, then they got to get all the answers before they do any work. Then pretty soon they're coming back saying, geez, I drank again. I said, well, did you have God? Oh yeah, I had God and I was working the steps. I said, bullshit. If you were working the steps, you wouldn't have drank. And this is what my sponsor, I told my sponsor a couple of years ago, I said, if he had lived in California, I would have drove to California to work with this guy. So today, when I'm asked to do something for AA, especially Big Book Step Study, I don't say, well, geez, I got to go to work in the morning. Maybe, I can't go there, Oh, God, I can't spend the gas, I don't say that stuff. I do it. I'm chaired, Laconia now, I moved to West Lebanon, so Laconia is now like an hour and a half from me. And they asked me to chair the meeting in Laconia. No problem. No problem. No more excuses when it comes to this. I drove with a guy all the way to Vero Beach, Florida, and got drunk. So I'm asked to drive an hour and a half or 2 hours to a meeting to chair a Big Book Step Study meeting or to speak. Jeez, that's a no-brainer. And so when Mike asked me if I wanted to speak, it really knocked me for a loop. Because I didn't think I had anything to say. I really don't. And I'm 16 years sober. I finished my reading in November of 07, and that's why I continue to work the steps, because this mind is the worst place for me to stay. That's why on that 2.5 hour ride this morning, I kept praying so that my mind would not start. Even the old timers back in March of 2001, when they got a hold of me up in Montpelier, Vermont. They said, John, you can't live in your head. Worst place for you to be. And I thank God for all this. I thank God for everybody that was put in my life since March 19th of 2001, because I know God put them there to save my ass. They knew I was in trouble. And my mind kept telling me, well, geez, I'm in AA, I'm okay. I'm not going to drink. I'm back in AA. It's like this fantasy world. And, just one more minute. My family, my sponsors having me read the family afterwards, and there is a vision for you. Last Tuesday, one of the gifts of this program is my ex-wife would not talk to me for years. And last Tuesday I called her because I didn't have two of my grandkids' birthdays. So I called her. We ended up talking for an hour and a half. And here's a woman who had every right to take me out behind the woodshed and shoot me. I gave her every reason. to do that. And we talked for an hour and a half. And I'm finding that my family, my 2 boys, I always thought my ex-wife was the problem. And I talked to my sponsor the other day and I said, you know, I think she was the only sane one in the family, because my 2 boys are out there. One's not drinking. I don't know about the other one. It's questionable. She said he's not drinking, but Tuesday night when I got off the phone with her, the disease of alcoholism hit me. For about 3 days, I had a horrible time just going to meetings. And I talked to my sponsor, and he said, read The Family Afterwards, and then A Vision for You. He said, The Family Afterwards has a lot of pertinent information of where I'm at with my family. And I'll tell you, this disease is a killer. I don't take it lightly. I continue. I'm still desperate. And I'm still hopeless if I don't continue to come here and do this. And I thank everybody in the Big Book Step Study process that shared since May of '06 how I am going to grow in this program and stay here. Because I'll tell you, you people, God put you guys in my life to save my butt. And especially my sponsor. I love the guy to pieces. I don't call him once in a while if I'm having a problem. I'll call him. But I know when I call him, I'm going to get honest advice. What a gift, that has been given me. And so when Mike asked me, I'm honored to be here. I'm honored to be at any AA meeting to speak, especially these meetings. This is my life right here. And I want to thank all of you for showing up. I got 2 special people up there that I thought my sponsor sent to spy on me from Newington. I'll have to ask him if he did that. Because he's that kind of guy. When he needs to be light and comical, he is. But when it comes right down to like me dealing with my family last Tuesday, he gets down and dirty and serious. What I have to do to change. So for that, I am grateful. And from all you people, I'd like to thank you again. And I thank God for saving my life today. Thanks.